Hello, John Bennett here with 3 Steps to Conquering ADD. And in today's module, we're going to talk about the 5 brain chemicals that ADD people tend to lack. And it's going to be very interesting, and it's very important to understand this. To be honest with you, it's kind of boring, but you need to know and understand what's going on in the brain, because this is going to be key in your decision whether or not you're going to use drugs, medication, or you're going to try to actually fix the problem at its source. So this is a key thing to understand. So let's get into it. The 5 brain chemicals that ADD people lack. And before we do that, we need to discuss what are neurotransmitters and really understand what that's all about, because these brain chemicals are the key to understanding why we have ADD and ADHD symptoms. So I'm going to show you a quick video that I found on YouTube, and it explains it much better than I can. So check it out.
The long spiny branches of the networks create a neural forest of astounding intricacy. Neurons use these communication lines to talk to each other with electric and chemical signals. Here under microscope are 2 neurons linking up. Though it may look like they fuse together, neurons don't actually touch each other. A closer look reveals that a tiny gap called the synapse separates their branches. This is where a message passes from one neuron to the next. The message comes from here, small sacs that store chemical molecules. When stimulated, these sacs release their molecules which cross the cell membrane into the synaptic gap. An electric zap allows this to happen. Meantime, the receiving neuron has special welcome sites for the incoming molecules. These receptor sites bind with the molecules. When they do, special gates open up. The gates let in a flood of charged particles, sodium and potassium ions, which start up a new electrical signal in the receiving neuron. This simple chain of events, an electrical zap followed by chemical changes, followed by another electrical zap, is the basis of all brain activity. It's how neurons speak to each other. Here, then, is the key to the brain's complexity. There are 100 billion neurons in the brain. Each neuron, like a bit player in a grand production, processes its information, then hooks up with as many as 50,000 other neurons to send and receive messages. 100 billion neurons times 50,000.
So as you can see, the chemicals in our brain cause a chain reaction that allow us to think and controls all of our bodily functions. So let's get into some of the different chemicals here. The first one we're going to talk about is serotonin. And serotonin, this is what a serotonin looks like. Not that it really matters, but it looks cool, right? So that's what a serotonin looks like. And what is serotonin? So serotonin helps modulate your brain's sleep. Serotonin needs to be balanced. And it needs to be balanced with the dopamine levels in the brain in order to calm your hyperactivity. So as you can tell, if serotonin is responsible for keeping the brain in order to calm hyperactivity, you can see how it would be an important chemical to make sure is balanced. It also is a signal mediator, which means it helps you know what to pay attention to. So this is a very important chemical, serotonin. If you lack that, you may not know. Let's see what happens when you lack serotonin. Your brain gets stuck in quote-unquote sleep mode. You have difficulty processing signals. One example that we can look at is if there are 10 TVs on the wall and you were trying to figure out which one was the message you need to focus in on. It's very difficult. You don't know what to pay attention to. So it's important that your serotonin levels are in balance. There's often this feeling of irritability. So if you can imagine, you can't pay attention and you're irritable, but you don't know why. You start to understand why ADD kids get in trouble in class a lot, and that they just are having trouble in social situations as well. So serotonin is a very important chemical. Let's look at the next one. Dopamine. Let's look at this. Dopamine helps control your attention, your memory, and your problem-solving abilities. It's called the motivating chemical, and it helps us feel rewarded when doing a task. Imagine, a lot of ADD people, they like to start things that the thrill of starting it, but then the having to follow through and finish it, oftentimes don't feel that motivation, don't feel rewarded in doing so. That's why we tend to start lots of things and never finish them. It controls the flow of information in the brain. If you lack dopamine, you'll have difficulty controlling your body movements. You'll get easily bored with tasks. Does this sound familiar to anyone? You find things useless and annoying, and you'll have an inability to focus on anything. So dopamine levels are very, very important. Opioids. What are opioids? Opioids are natural pain relievers, and they manage our flight or fight responses. It's very important that your opioid levels are correct. They make us feel relaxed or geared up for emergencies. So, as you can imagine, if your opioids are going crazy and you're not supposed to be in a flight or fight response, you got a large feeling of anxiety. Opioids also trigger the release of dopamine that we just discussed. So as you can imagine, if opioids are off, it's like a chain reaction. So once again, opioids are natural pain relievers, and they manage our flight or fight response, and they trigger the release of dopamine. What happens if you lack opioids? It forces the levels of GABA down. It makes you feel a sense of urgency. Has anybody felt a sense of urgency, especially sitting in a meeting, a boring meeting, or a boring classroom, and just feel like you're just going to go bananas? Well, I have. It makes you feel hyperactive and hypervigilant, over alert, which, unless you're under attack, you shouldn't be feeling these things. So that's what a lack of opioids can cause. It's also, once again, not motivated to finish tasks. So it seems to be a common theme. So that's opioids. Let's look at GABA. There's a GABA. Isn't that cool? And let's see, what is GABA? It regulates your body's excitability. It is a signal mediator. It inhibits brain cells from firing anxiety-related messages. It keeps your brain from being bombarded with tons of signals. It's the building block for other neurotransmitters. It's like a raw ingredient that you need to have. If you don't have enough GABA, you cannot prioritize tasks. You feel overwhelmed, ready to react at the slightest stimulation. And you'll have a dopamine and serotonin deficiency if you don't have enough GABA. So that's very important. You'll always feel anxious and over alert. And you always feel like you're in crisis mode. Norepinephrine, epinephrine. So what is norepinephrine? It's a natural response to emergency. It increases heart rate, mediates physical readiness, and releases energy. It's like adrenaline, okay? It's produced in your adrenal glands. What happens if you don't have enough norepinephrine? It's a critical component for your human survival because it stimulates the delivery of oxygen and nutrients. And if you don't have it, your vital functions are way less efficient. And if you don't have enough, your brain doesn't think anything is critical enough to focus in on. So, in conclusion, brain chemicals control anxiety levels, attention, focus, mood, and motivation. So it would be good for us to make sure we understand what's going on in the brain. And this is really where the real cause of ADD is. It's either a lack or an imbalance of these chemicals. See, and we're going to get into this in greater detail, I'm going to prove to you that drugs artificially manipulate these chemicals in a way that you do not want. Cause all kinds of other problems in the body. I'm also going to show you in these modules how we fix the problem at its source with various different techniques, supplements, and dietary changes. There's one thing I would like to share with you. I have a cassette tape. It's a really old cassette tape. I'm going to put the link here with the module. I suggest you listen to it because the topic is about these brain chemicals. It's put out by the company, I think it was put out in like 1985 or something, the Neurogenesis company. And the doctor goes into detail about brain chemicals and how important it is to understand these brain chemicals. So I highly recommend you download that and listen to that as well. So, in conclusion, these are the brain chemicals we need to really understand, and understand that ADD people lack or have a deficiency and or have an imbalance in these. And we'll get into more detail on how to fix that. Once again, thank you, and I'll see you soon.